残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ
Hello there everybody, Epic Spelling Mistake here. Today we are going to take a look at the certain build for Soviets, and you might possibly wondering, what is this build, Negev? What? 6 combat engineers. Really? Yeah. And yes, I'm aware of that tightrope video, and I tell you that 5 years of casting did nothing for tightrope. Today, I'll show you how do you really do the engineer spam. Let's start with the basics, them being the main force of your army, the combat engineers. They are armed with conscripts Mosons and have 1.0 received accuracy, which is actually their selling point, because for 170 manpower and 17 reinforcement cost, that's literally a steal. Ability wise, they can obviously plant 2 types of mines, barbed wire, plant demo charges, make structures in your base because they are your engineering unit after all, and if you have the hazard removal package, cut wires and detect mines. Upgrades of the engineers include, but are not limited to, the flamethrower and aforementioned hazard removal package. Veterancy wise, there are nothing special outside of the fact that from Vet 2 onwards, it appears that their Vet receives a whopping 80% experience gain penalty, which is a really big detriment to the unit. However, like, you know, it's not like we care about it anyway, don't we? Still, I'm going to go through the veterancy because, you know, why not? So the first veterancy gives them access to the trip mines, second veterancy gives them minor accuracy boost and a pretty big repair speed increase, and finally Vet 3 removes the vulnerability during repairs and reduces the received accuracy from 1.0 to 0.77. Anyway, let us commence for the basic pieces of the build, then proceed with how to pick engagement, transition into specific techings, tank choices, support weapons, and tactics. Also, I feel like I should do a little bit of a disclaimer here. I've never used that build with anything but the airborne doctrine, so the guide will be mostly focused around this one particular tactic. Keep that in mind. So, you want to open up with 6 combat engineers and start capping the map like crazy, since you can pump out at least 4 to 5 units before the first engagement. With that being said, you should probably avoid engagement for as long as you can with singular engineers. Only pick once you have tactical advantage on your side, you know, something like numerical advantage, cover advantage, or later in the game, weapon or veterancy advantage. Anyway, the goal for the early game is quite simple. You want to minimize the bleed as much as possible and gather as many munitions as you can. Doing so, you can do some funky stuff in the next couple of minutes of the game. With the first engagement done and dusted with, you and your opponents are knowing what you're up to. It's time to put pressure on them. Upgrade flamethrowers for engineers as fast as possible. And against your own instinct, do not place mines. At least yet. At 2 command points, mark, you gain access to your scaling options. SVTs and the Dushka, also air guards, but I won't talk about them because most of the times they are really irrelevant. Dushka is obviously going to help you with keeping the enemy infantry paralyzed, as it suppresses infantry nearly in one burst, while SVTs will give your combat engineers, at least those who don't have flamethrowers, a real chance at fighting back, because those are actually penal SVTs. Also at this stage, if your opponent starts to get tunnel vision at a certain point, say a middle victory point or a fuel point, capitalize it via planting mines everywhere else if you're happy with the state of your infantry prowess. I tested a couple of light vehicles with this build, because as it relies on speed and aggression, you can experiment with it a lot. The obvious choice, the T-70, is probably going to be the most reliable one, surprise surprise, although I can't stress enough how useful the half-track is in both of its forms. As a reinforcement half-track, it obviously sustains your front line and can be used as an improvised clown car, and as a AA half-track, it's a good light vehicle deterrent, Granted that your opponent didn't go for anything funny like a Puma, which unironically applies to both factions since mobile defense has received some kind of attraction as a doctrine recently. SU-76 is also a choice, however, I would not get it if you apply it again in tier 4 since SU-76 is only really effective in large numbers due to its longer range and lesser damage in Barrage. But with that being said, you can mix and match vehicles depending on your mood. Double T-70? Go ahead, it works. Half truck and T-70? Yeah, sure. SU-76 and T-70? Also works, somewhat. Late game is pretty simple. You roleplay as a fat British player and sit on victory points, feigning that you might have fell asleep on your desk, while in fact, you're not. After all, you have about 5 T-34s ready, right? Possibly my favorite thing about the build is that combat engineers are a little bit more popcap efficient compared to standard Soviet composition of like 3 cons, 1 guard or 4 cons, coming with around 30 pop for combat engineers, while the builds above have around 32 pop. Granted, the cons are upgraded with 7-man consoles. If they're not, then the builds kinda equalize themselves, about 30 pop for infantry. Anyway, what does it mean in the grand scheme of things? Well, you can just spam out T-34 like there's no tomorrow due to the lesser population of your core army. In most of my games, mostly because of my stupidity, I managed to climb up to 3 T-34s, which were just relentlessly bullied by OKW opponents, whilst I was capping the entire map with combat engineers and Vet 3 T-70, which was left from my mid-game. Truly, it was something beautiful. So, the build goes something along the lines of these. You start with 6 combat engineers, upgrade 2 or 3 of them with flamethrowers at the start, then after that get medics and tier 2, then once you hit 2 CPs get a Dushka, and somewhere at about 5-minute mark get an AT gun, and start thinking about tier 3. Once you have enough fuel, get a light vehicle of your choice, and depending on your well-being, get tier 4 and start spamming T-34s, or just stay at tier 3 and just spam light vehicles. I think I should also dedicate a section for mind games, which, surprise surprise, are really effective. So, firstly, you can plant demo charges at occupied garrisons, forcing your opponent to leave it. Secondly, you can falsely pretend to plant mines and cancelling them at the very last second, making your opponent, if he of course sees it, go for sweepers. Mines are meant to be placed in expected positions, as well as literally on every single point of interest at any map, be it the end of the hedgerows on Langres, that weird Omega Road on Boyo, sniper towers on Milf. You get the point. You have 6 engineers, make use of them. With mines, you have obviously 2 choices, the AT one and the trip mine. In the footage shown in here, I only placed AT mines, but that mostly comes down to me being stupid and forgetting that trip mines are on engineers in the first place. Oops. Anyway, consider placing them on entrances to garrisons, infantry pathways, or some other critical points of the map, like somewhere behind the walls that cover cutoff points of Framerville, or behind that big haystack on the, the cursed map. With that being said, let's talk about some things that you should be wary of, because, 6 combat engineers aren't really all about sunshines and rainbows. So, firstly, OKW as a faction counters this build fairly strongly due to their units having better initial DPS, more models in squad, and are less static, which means that you can do less skirting around front lines, which is usually the case for Ostier and their over-reliance on MG42 early game. Ultralights, or just light vehicles in general, are also the bane of this build, since you have no snares at all, and all your munitions went into infantry upgrades or Dushkas, and because of it you don't really have any immunity for mines, which could be disarmed anyway. But if you somehow make it through and somehow snipe the enemy light vehicle with like a mine or lucky AT gun shot, you're definitely going to make it through. Hopefully. Secondly, upgraded main lines of access hurt. Like, they really hurt. With lack of green cover options on your mainline infantry, you literally get no options for green cover outside of maybe wrecks of your own vehicles. However, so does your opponent, given the fact that you can place barbed wire literally everywhere, including his stupid head. This really screws up with OKW Volk heavy builds, since those players tend to just spam sandbags down your throat, and with a lot of engineers this isn't really a problem. Besides, you can, just shoot the bags with your Zizgun or something. Seeing a lot of engineers, austere players are more lenient towards getting either Panzer Grenadiers or slapping G43s on their Grenadiers, which both are mistakes because of your imminent light vehicle or the Dushka, making him an easy prey to you and your red horde of combat engineers if they are blowing at the wrong place and wrong time. With OKW players seeing what you're doing, they also might go with something a little bit unorthodox as well, like the Luchs, Fallschirmjägers or IR SCG Obers, but then again, it's OKW, so like 99% of the remaining players don't really know the definition of fun, and they are most certainly going to go with either GLI, Fallschirmjägers or 221. In other words, watch out for these units. 251 because of the flamethrower upgrade, which is just going to maybe not bleed but burn you to death. 222 because it's just going to clap you around. 221 because it's going to clap you around, but even earlier, and 250 because it's just going to kill you if there are any squads on board outside of Grenadiers. But most importantly, just try not to bleed. With bleed or losing a squad, you are potentially losing 60 or even 120 munitions if you are upgraded both SVT and a flamethrower. Also, it's a loss of momentum and snowballing, and if you are going to stop snowballing, you are dead. Honestly, I think that's really all that it comes to the build. So yeah, if you really like it, or rather like the video, then consider subscribing and liking your typical YouTuber shelling. And I don't know, join my Discord and share your terrible replays with me, because at the start of January I'm coming back to casting games. Woohoo! How exciting! I know. Anyway, I think in December there's going to be one more video. However, just as with this video, this one is going to take a lot of work because it would require me to play like 5 games and get specific units from all across the factions, and that's going to be very painful and will probably take very long. So yeah, I would arm myself in patience if I were you, honestly. But anyway, that was it if it comes to this terrible build, and just see you around next time, I suppose.